This is a numbers game with Gil Alexander, broadcasting only on the Vegas Stats and Information Network.
He's one of those idiots who believe in analytics.
Analytics, statistics, and more are used to win wagers, and Gil has every number you need to cash your tickets. Now, live from the VSiN studios in the South Point Hotel and Casino, it's Gil Alexander.
It is a numbers game right here at VSiN, the Vegas Stats and Information Network, Sirius XM Channel 204. We'll get this right. VSiN.com, the VSiN app, and of course, Fubo TV. It's where sports betting analytics live, everybody. Actionable sports betting information. Or maybe today, not even sports betting. Maybe a little midterm election betting information. Actionable, though, as well. Matt Jones in for Jorge this morning. Matt Jones. You remember there was a rapper? Well, it was Mike Jones who used to say that.
Yeah, that changed my life.
Did it
when
really?
He came out,
People,
yeah.
every time they walk by
That
you?
was like my sophomore year of high school.
Matt
as soon as that
Jones.
came out, I became Matt Jones.
Yeah, I'm sure. Hey, so Jorge's out this week. That's why Matt is in here, ably filling in. I can just imagine when I say I have election bets to make later on the show that the VSiN brass is like, oh no, what's he doing? It's not political in nature. We all worship at the same altar here. The altar of green. We're trying to make money. So where the value is doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. We're going to where the value is in the bets. I have 3 bets. One is a general one. 2 are specific. We'll do that later on in the show and get Jimmy Vaccaro's thoughts on elections. Because Jimmy has, and here's the thing about Jimmy's very macro thoughts on elections through the years. Jimmy, who has talked about this for many, many years, it's actually changed through the years in one respect. Because he believes that this should be a betting vehicle, but he didn't always stay sacred to that. So I want to get into that coming up later on the show. Hockey analytics with our friend Andy McNeil from Edmonton, Alberta. Big stuff happening in hockey. Chicago Blackhawks, 3-time Stanley Cup champion coach Joel Quenneville fired this morning. Out. We'll talk to him about that, the impact there. The Ottawa Senators apparently were in the back of an Uber, and with black and white grainy footage, were just murdering their coaches, just killing their coaches. Now they've had to apologize. We'll talk to him about that. And then the analytics on the LA Kings, who made a coaching change as well. We'll talk to Andy about that and get a hockey pick or 2 from him tonight. Hopefully, the number is where it needs to be to trigger a bet here. We'll do his segment coming up. And, of course, we're burying the headlines. Mike Lombardi on the NFL, my weekly segment with Mike where we just go ahead and complain about coaches. Mike and I have extended that to texting, complaining about coaches during the week as well. But we got that segment coming up on the show. Dan Besbris on the NBA. Jimmy Butler holding the T-Wolves hostage, among other things in the NBA. And is it time for Luke Walton to go with the Lakers? We'll get into all that. Who am I forgetting? Oh, Pete Fiutak. Pete would be very upset that I left him for last. Pete Fiutak, College Football News, get his thoughts on how that West Virginia-Texas game ended last week. Alabama, LSU, is he just over it at this point? And who he thinks the big movers and shakers will be in tonight's college football rankings, the second installment of the college football rankings this season. Alabama, Clemson, Notre Dame, Michigan, and we'll see where everybody else falls, basically. Let's begin real quick. Obviously, last night, National Football League. Tennessee Titans going to Dallas, beat the Cowboys 28-14 in a game that didn't start that way. You wouldn't have thought that it would end this way because the Titans were just loose with the football early. First of all, Cowboys' first drive of the game came down, doinked the field goal. Brett Maher missing a 38-yarder. Didn't doink it, just missed it wide on the opening possession. Marcus Mariota fumbling the football on the Titans' first 2 possessions. At least he officially gets the fumbles. One of which led to a Cowboys touchdown. The other of which was followed by a Dak Prescott pick into the back of the end zone to Kevin Byard. Kevin Byard then proceeding to sprint all the way to the star a la T.O. back in the day against the Niners. He does so. Pre-planned, ready to do that. And that interception in many ways changed that football game because the Cowboys could have really put the Titans in a big-time hole there. But Dak returning the favor. By the way, it looked like the Titans were going to have a third fumble, but it was overturned. A Luke Stocker fumble, but it was ruled that he didn't have the ball long enough on a catch. Prescott also, in addition to that pick, lost a fumble at his 40-yard line to set up Tennessee's tie-breaking score in the third quarter. Titans are now 4-4, straight up, Cowboys 3-5. And it cannot be stressed enough the big difference between those two records in terms of playoff probability. 4-4 and 3-5. And by the way, both of these teams, that's particularly noteworthy because of the schedules these two teams have coming up. Cowboys now at Philadelphia, at Atlanta, home Washington, home Saints, home Eagles. Their next 5 games. So you're 3-5 versus 4-4 heading into that. That much more behind the 8 ball. There will be no playoffs, Dallas Cowboys fans. There just won't be. Titans got a really tough schedule, not maybe quite that tough coming up, but they're home Patriots, at Colts, at Texans, their next 3. A lot nicer to go through that starting out at 4-4 than it is at 3-5. And 2 very competitive divisions, the NFC East and AFC South, respectively. Jerry Jones saying there will be no in-season coaching change. The Clapper, Jason Garrett's okay. By the way, Matt, if you ever want to, I don't want to say this out loud because people go watch it now, but there's a dude who dressed up as Jason Garrett for Halloween. It's on YouTube. It is phenomenal. He nails it. Got the whole out. He does the whole act too, where all he does is clap, adjust his whatever's attached to his buckle. Makes a comment about 4th down, whether they should go for it or not, clap some more.
I'm watching this right now.
It's phenomenal.
It's awesome.
It's really good stuff. Amari Cooper for the Cowboys yesterday. He did score that first touchdown for the Cowboys. Ended up with 5 catches for 58 yards. Or as Joe Tessitore would tell you about those 5 catches or 58 yards, 50 yards and 580 yards. 50 catches and 580 yards receiving. The way he was announcing Amari Cooper. By the way, was ever more made of a slant and out pattern for a short touchdown than that one was last night? Good Lord, we get it. You're excited. Amari Cooper is on the Cowboys. We scored the first touchdown. His first touchdown with a star on his helmet. Stop it. Relax. Dallas had just 108 yards in the second half yesterday. Just 108 yards. And Sean Lee, their standout linebacker, who means so much to results of Cowboys games, maybe more so than any other member of the Dallas Cowboys, if Sean Lee's in the lineup versus if Sean Lee's out of it. He pulled up with a hamstring injury while trying to cover on a 26-yard completion to the Titans tight end yesterday, Smith. Hamstring injury. Lee did not return. He's great. He just can't stay on the field. So that's huge, obviously, as well. So that's the deal with that game, though. Titans 4-4, Cowboys 3-5, and in an NFC East where the Redskins now have cluster injuries at offensive line. The Redskins yesterday announcing that Sean Laval out for the season. Both of their starting guards out for the season. And not to mention that Moses and Trent Williams, their tackles, are banged up all the time. They're in big trouble. The Redskins, that is. Just absolutely devastated there. And so the Giants are the Giants. They're 1-7. That is the Eagles' division. The Eagles' division to win. No question about that. We'll see what odds you can get on that currently. But it's Brandon Scherf and Sean Laval, the Redskins starting guards, done for the year, placed on IR. Not to mention Paul Richardson, starting wideout, acquired in free agency from the Seahawks this offseason. He's also out for the year. So good luck, Skins. Currently atop the NFC East at 5-3, but obviously now big trouble for them. And I already thought they were a paper tiger before that. Super Contest, Matt. We haven't really updated this on this show for many weeks. I had a big Super Contest week in both Gold and Classic, but I barely made up any ground because this was a pretty solid week for everybody. 4-1 in my shared Classic entry, 5-0 in Gold. But Dave Tooley, our own VSiN's own Dave Tooley, whose work can be found each and every week in Point Spread Weekly, and occasional appearances here on air at VSiN. Dave Tooley on top of the Super Contest as always, one of the great chroniclers, if not the great chronicler of the Super Contest throughout the years over at the Westgate. Dave Tooley at his Twitter at View from Vegas, updating it. Personal Gourmet is now the Super Contest Classic leader after week number 9. He went 4-1, or she, Personal Gourmet, whoever that is, capping off with Tennessee's win last night. So Personal Gourmet Super Contest Classic, 36-9, 80%. Not straight up, against the number. 36-9. It's just ridiculous. That's the thing. When you get 3,200 plus entries, you're going to get somebody just randomly doing that. Not to take anything away from Personal Gourmet, because that is the person that happens to be doing it. But somebody's going to do that at some point. Now, and I don't know if the winner will finish with 80%, but mid-70s or low 70s is not a stretch at all. Three-way tie, let me see now. So that's 36-9. Pigskin Junkies, who split the $15,000 first half bonus, and Superbook, and Superbook USA with Personal Gourmet as co-leaders after week 8. They went 3-2 and is alone in second at 35-10. So Pigskin Junkies, second place, 35-10. One game behind Personal Gourmet, who's at 80%, 36-9 in Super Contest Classic. Dave Tooley, also at View from Vegas, goes on to update Super Contest Gold standings as well. By the way, Super Contest Gold doesn't have, as you know, any in-season bonuses, just the winner-take-all prize of $640,000, up from $470,000 last year. There's a three-way tie in Super Contest Gold, $5,000 entry into Super Contest Gold. Remember, Classic is $1,500. Three-way tie at 30.5 points in Super Contest Gold with Hammer 3. I don't want to offend Hammers 1 and 2. Hammer 3, who went 5-0 in Week 9 this past week, with two other co-leaders from last week, Champion Iceman 2 and Jay Rich, who both went 4-1. So they're all tied at 30.5. So in all that, I only made up a game, because everybody was crushing it in Week 9. 30.5 leading Super Contest Gold, winner take all, through 9 weeks of the 17-week NFL season. And if you're behind in Super Contest Classic or Super Contest Gold, that was the week to start your comeback. Week 9 for sure. Early enough where you can still make a viable run, because again, you're just at the halfway mark of the season. And the fact that it was just a good week across the board for Classic and Gold entries. You had to make hay that week. If you didn't, well, it's probably time to think about it next year. Anyway, we always thank Dave Tooley for that, who not only updates Super Contest Classic and Super Contest Gold, but does so for all contests across the board here in Las Vegas, handicapping contests, that is, for football season. Dave can be found, once again, at View from Vegas. We'll do hockey analytics. Our friend Andy McNeil, at BetAndyBet on Twitter, he's got thoughts on the Senators, on the Blackhawks, on the LA Kings, our Point Spread Weekly hockey expert, and I think a hockey picker too, on the way, right here on a numbers game, right here at VSiN.
It's a numbers game, live from the tip of the strip in Las Vegas. Get your fill of numbers even after the show is over by following the crew on Twitter, at Beating the Book and at VSiN Live.
Like any other business, you have to keep reintroducing yourself to new things to keep people excited. And we found one, in-progress betting. 30 years ago, no one even knew what that was about. Now, as games are going on, we come to a timeout or a delay of game, we post odds for those particular games that you're watching in front of you. So what it makes easier for people who come in a little bit late, they can catch up on betting their favorite team because we're always posting odds on the board. It's not a big limit sport. It's only $1,000 in most places, but it keeps the interest there. So I can only tell you that something that maybe we shied away from 10 years ago, we welcome it now.
Some of the challenges with booking in play is about the synchronization of when you're coming into the end of a period, such as into the first quarter or into the halftime. You want to make sure that what you're going to offer from a halftime number also is in sync with what the in-game number is. Sometimes there's some arbitrage opportunities there that you need to manage.
Yeah, so in-game wagering, once that game kicks off, not only are we're just two guys below me, so there's three of us on a Saturday and Sunday. So as soon as that game kicks off, we're not only doing the regular games and the regular halftimes, we got one guy just sitting there banging away on a Saturday, booking all those games in-game. We got another guy watching all the mobile app, all the phone wagering coming in. So it's quite busy for us. We're really, really busy with in-game, but we got to do it. It's the way the whole world's going right now with in-game play.
The in-progress option that books are offering now is becoming more and more popular, and it's going to be more prominent as we move down the line. I think our biggest challenge as bookmakers is finding a reliable automated source for the U.S. market. What we're looking at right now, I don't think is acclimated to the U.S. market. So that's going to be our biggest challenge, is finding that partner that we see that has adjusted and more or less Americanized to the betting market here. Once we find that, it's going to take a lot of relief off the manpower that it takes to do the in-progress wagering option ourselves.
Back to a numbers game with your host, Gil Alexander, broadcasting live from our VSiN studios in Las Vegas.
Back on a numbers game, Gil Alexander with Matt Jones sitting in for Jorge. Where's Jorge again this week? What's he doing?
He's we just did a little producer shuffle. He's filling in for another guy who's on vacation.
Jorge was like, whatever you do, get me out of here. Get me away from this kid. I need a week off. I think that's how it went. Something like that. Jorge may be back next week. We don't know. We shall see. Allegedly. Hope he's doing well. Let's talk a little hockey. We don't get a chance to talk hockey that often. Hopefully we can do it weekly with our hockey analytics expert. At BetAndyBet is where you can find him on Twitter. Pithy hockey tweets. It's our friend Andy McNeil. Good morning to you, Andy.
Hey, how you doing today, guys?
Doing very well. Both of us are. Andy, I have questions. Before I get to the subject of your Point Spread weekly piece, some sneaky hockey news coming down the pipeline here. The Blackhawks firing coach Joel Quenneville this morning, or yesterday late, I should say. He won 3 Stanley Cups with the Blackhawks, longest tenured coach in the NHL, been with the team since 2008. You think, I know we're going to get to this with your piece on the Kings, might this spark the Blackhawks, or are you just kind of like, yeah, whatever?
I'm like, yeah, whatever. I think it's an interesting move. I think Joel Quenneville is a really, really good coach, and I'd be very surprised if he's not back behind the bench somewhere before this season's over. I could see it happening very, very soon. When somebody comes like that comes available, teams start looking at what they have and whether or not they want to stick with the coaching staff that they have when a guy like Quenneville becomes available. But they're bringing in Jeremy. I forget his last name. I'm sorry, but
I believe
he's
it's
a 33-year.
I believe, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. It was on the tip of my tongue. He's a 33-year-old coach. He's coached in Sweden and in the American Hockey League with Rockford. So it's interesting going from, a veteran guy like Quenneville down to this, I'm guessing somewhat of a progressive modern coach in Jeremy. I forget it already.
Jeremy, I hope
Colleton.
Cotelon, yeah, Cotelon, I believe it is. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Blackhawks 6-6-3 now, second to last place in the Central. But early enough in the season where the Blackhawks hoping for a spark. Jeremy Colleton, youngest head coach at 33 in the NHL. So let's hope that he's a progressive analytics guy, as you say. The other news, which is sort of the kind of off the cuff stuff that doesn't have anything to do with hockey specifically, but is a bunch of guys in the back of an Uber criticizing their coaches. The Ottawa Senators, 7 of them. Had to issue an apology on Monday night after their conversation in an Uber ride, which was caught on tape. They criticizing the team's poor play and an assistant coach. They were ripping assistant coach Marty Raymond, who is in charge of their penalty kill. And it was a 5-minute recording. First of all, why are there 7 Senators in the back of an Uber? Were there 7 of them back there?
Yeah, 5 or 6 or 7.
First of all, what's that all about? And it gets recorded, and they had to apologize for this. But one of the things that they were saying in there, do you notice that when Raymond runs the video, if you actually do pay attention, he doesn't ever teach you anything? He just commentates on what's happening. What do you make of this? Is this something or not anything at all?
Well, I mean, it's something because it's definitely going to be a trying time in the Ottawa Senators locker room over the next little bit. I can't imagine it's a very comfortable place to be right now. Those are some pretty notable players. Matt Duchene is in there. Anybody who follows hockey will know Matt Duchene. He's a star player in the league, and it's not a great look. It's unfortunate. I mean, everybody that's ever had a job has vented about their boss, in private with their buddies or coworkers.
What?
And so it's unfortunate. Yeah, I mean, Jorge complains about you all the time.
That's right. That's exactly right.
So it's unfortunate that happened, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens moving forward with that, whether or not the relationship is too strained between some of the players in the organization to move forward peacefully. But I'm not sure what'll happen. It's really funny at the very least.
At the very least, it is a little moment of comedy, I guess, if you're anybody but penalty killing coach Marty Raymond, I suppose. Guy Boucher, their coach, had to issue a statement too after the apology. So anyway, that's that. Ottawa, currently at this point in the season, 5-6-3, third to last. Let's call it sixth place in the Atlantic right now. All right, we're talking to Andy McNeil, our VSiN Point Spread Weekly hockey expert at BetAndyBet on Twitter. Your piece this week in Point Spread Weekly has to do with a coaching change, and specifically has to do with a coaching change with the LA Kings. Let's start there. Give us your thoughts here on this and the brief sort of recent history of the Kings when it comes to this.
All right, yeah, I'll start at the beginning, and I'll try to be as brief as possible. But back in 2011, anybody that's been following along the last decade, a coaching change happened in LA. The Kings got rid of Terry Murray. They brought in Daryl Sutter, a hard-nosed, no BS kind of hockey coach. And he led the team to their first Stanley Cup in franchise history back in 2011. They won the Cup again in 13-14. And really cemented themselves as, one of the powerhouses of the last decade. In 14-15, however, the team failed to qualify for the playoffs, becoming just the fourth team in NHL history to do so the year after winning the Stanley Cup. And that's when the strained relationship kind of became publicized between Sutter and his players. I remember it well because it was here in Edmonton. The Kings lost a game against the Oilers, who were a 28th place team at the time. Their playoff hopes were dashed, and rumors circulated that they actually barred head coach Daryl Sutter from the locker room after that game. Wouldn't let him into the locker room. So that all started in 14-15. Sutter came back the following year. The Kings had a bit of a bounce back. They made the playoffs, but they were knocked out early by the San Jose Sharks. Then Sutter came back in 16-17, and the Kings posted their worst record since 2009, a winning one nonetheless. But they finished 10th in the Western Conference, and Sutter was out immediately following the team's exit from the playoffs. So they promoted John Stevens from within. He was with the organization for quite some time. And the Kings, you could argue, had a bounce-back season last year. They posted a 45-29-8 record. They were good enough to qualify for the playoffs. But as everybody remembers, they were swept in the first round by the Vegas Golden Knights. And I guess the leash was shortened on the Kings coaching staff because they're off to a 4-8-1 record or a start here in through 13 games. They're last in the Western Conference. And after oddly enough, after they defeated the Columbus Blue Jackets 4-1 at home on Saturday, on Sunday, they let go John Stevens and one of his assistant coaches. Rob Blake, the general manager of the Kings, he talked about the team lacking passion in training camp and that carrying over into the regular season and leading to their abysmal start. So replacing Stevens on an interim basis is Willie Desjardins. He's won a couple of championships in junior. He coached the Canadian men's hockey Olympic team in Pyeongchang to a bronze medal. And he spent 3 full seasons behind the bench of the Vancouver Canucks, making the playoffs once in 14-15. So basically the question for bettors is, what does this coaching change mean? Does it mean the Kings should improve going forward? Should they have been expected to improve regardless of who was behind the bench? There's a few issues I have with this. For the first problem is that the Kings are old. especially in hockey years. Back when they were winning the Stanley Cup in 2011, guys like Drew Doughty, he was 22 years old. Anze Kopitar was 24. Dustin Brown, 27. Jeff Carter and Jonathan Quick, 26. All of those players, aside from Doughty, who's only 28, are, entering the twilights of their careers at 31, 32, 33, and even higher than that. Players don't get any better as they get older. They only get worse. So that's the first problem. The second problem is that the team, what made the Kings so great was their possession numbers, their puck possession numbers. Corsi 4% at 5-on-5. The Kings just outshot opponents by such considerable margins that they were able to overcome any other problems they had. But that edge that they had in shot attempts, Corsi 4% at 5-on-5, has diminished over the last number of years to the point where now they're basically a break-even team in terms of their shot attempts. So that leads me to the third problem, which is goal scoring. The Kings don't do enough of it. They've been a low percentage team all along here. They've ranked in the bottom half of the league in terms of 5-on-5 shooting percentage. Their highest percentage season was actually last season in 2017-18. They ranked, and it was still only good for 16th in the league. But, there's a caveat to that. When you see a team's Corsi 4% at 5-on-5 take a nosedive like the Kings percentage has, and their shooting percentage rises, that's usually a recipe for regression.
Makes sense. Yes.
Yeah, it's just the team stops doing the things that a winning hockey team does, and all of a sudden they're finding more success because of it. It's a red flag that things aren't really real, for lack of a better term. So, they added Ilya Kovalchuk in the offseason. He's actually leading the team. He made his return to the NHL from the KHL. He's 35 years old. He's another, old veteran player, but he still has some stuff left. But the coaching change really is just a Band-Aid solution. This roster needs some significant turnover, just like the Chicago Blackhawks. Both of these teams were the class of the NHL in the early part of the decade. And, it looks like both of these organizations are trying to hold on to that when really they need to hit the reset button. The Kings have underperformed, though. At 5-on-5, they've been expected to score about 50% of the goals. They've only scored 37%. So regardless of who's behind the bench for the Kings, chances are, they're going to win more games or win games at a higher clip down the stretch, and they likely would have regardless of who was coaching the team. I think for bettors, if you came into the season and you had the team pegged as a mediocre hockey team and you've lost money pricing them as such, I wouldn't beat yourself up over it. I think the Kings are pretty much an average hockey team. They're without Jonathan Quick now. That's going to hurt. The Kings are actually allowing more goals than they ever have per 60 minutes. So the fact that they don't have their starting goaltender for the foreseeable future, he's recovering from surgery out indefinitely, that's a problem. But the goal scoring should see an uptick, a little bit of one. But, this team they're old and they've lost the things that made them a good team to begin with. So it's really unlikely that you're going to see any kind of run here from the LA Kings. I think they'll get themselves out of the basement. Yep. But both with LA and Chicago, I don't think you'll see any major improvements there. None that were not going to happen anyway.
Age, Corsi 4 percentage, don't put the biscuit in the basket. That's a pretty tough trifecta right there. By the way, Corsi, as we always do point out, advanced stat in the NHL to measure shot attempt differential while at even strength play. Includes shots on goals, missed shots on goal, block shot attempts towards the opposition's net, minus the same shot attempts directed at your own team's net. It's a whole thing, and it's often portrayed in percentage form. That's what Corsi percentage is. Each individual player has a Corsi number. It goes on and on. Named after an old Buffalo Sabres coach, by the way, Corsi. All that said, as you're going through that dissertation then, Andy, and we'll close with this. By the way, it should be noted that as you're going through that, money coming in on the Kings in their game against the Ducks later tonight. Kings right now at about minus 135. That shot up like a Christmas tree, just coincidentally as we were talking. But it is a 9-game slate in the NHL tonight. A pick or two. Is there still value anywhere on the board?
Yeah, we'll go back to the Ottawa Senators here. The New Jersey Devils are in Ottawa tonight, and I'm sure they'll be chirping them on the ice over that video surfacing. But yeah, the Devils are minus 130 right now, I believe, in Vegas. Offshore showing about minus 131. I got down on the Devils at minus 125. I still like them at minus 130. I'm comfortable laying $1.30 to win $1 there. The other game that I'm kind of monitoring right now, I haven't jumped in yet, is the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Vegas Golden Knights. If Max Pacioretty was not to play, I would really like the Leafs at minus 125, showing here on Offshore. I think around minus 130 in town there. But I would like the Leafs at either of those numbers. If Pacioretty does play, it's not something I'd be a fan of. So I can't see myself being on that game because I don't think we'll know about whether or not Pacioretty will play until closer to game time. So we'll see. But right now it's just the Devils at minus 130, $1.30 to win $1.
All right, $1.30 to win $1. A couple ticks higher than that offshore, as you point out. The Devils at Ottawa, and news pending. Keeping an eye on that Vegas-Toronto game at the T-Dot. That's how the cool kids call Toronto, man. The T-Dot. The 6.
The 6.
That's right, however Drake calls it. Thank you, Andy. Appreciate it. Andy McNeil, our Point Spread Weekly hockey expert. Again, follow him on Twitter at BetAndyBet. Appreciate it, sir.
All right, thanks. And I appreciate that you guys didn't make fun of my Canadian accent today.
Oh, no, I should at the end mention that you have a podcast. I should mention that. It's called the TikTok Tout Podcast, but you can't let Andy promote it because he says TikTok Tote. And so then you'll look up the wrong thing and you'll never find it. So it's TikTok Tout. That is Andy's podcast. So now you can't thank me anymore, Andy. Sorry about that.
All right. Have a great day, guys.
All right, you too. Andy McNeil, best in the business, best in the hockey business from Edmonton, Alberta. Got a pick tonight on the New Jersey Devils. Coming back, Dan Bespris on the NBA. Mike Lombardi on the NFL. VSiN Zone. Can't wait for that. Pete Futak, college football news. And election bets. Midterm action. Hey. There's just one college football game tonight. I need some action. I'm going that way. It's coming up on a numbers game right here at VSiN.
It's a numbers game, live from the tip of the strip in Las Vegas. Get your fill of numbers even after the show is over by following the crew on Twitter, at Beating the Book and at VSiN Live.
If you didn't catch VSiN last week, here's some of what you missed.
This is from Playboy. I think they're both. Playboy is when Tyson got knocked out by James Buster Douglas. So Playboy
Buster Douglas, yeah.
Last year, and they had this wonderful picture of Douglas standing over top of Tyson. So they called me up. They did a story around it, and this is one of the things that I will always keep. Now, I also want to make it clear that Playgirl contacted me to be in their next centerfold issue. Also,
is that the basketball picture?
It was a yin and a yang. Yeah, that was it.
You certainly are going to settle for just the first-round pick for Derek Carr. I'm thinking that if someone offers them a first and a fourth, the conditional fourth, which could elevate based on certain conditions, kind of like the Sam Bradford trade, maybe they have to seriously consider that. Don't forget, 2016, Derek Carr, third in the MVP voting. People were making these Aaron Rodgers comparisons, which don't seem to have any validity for the way he's played ever since then. But quarterbacks are hard to find, and teams overvalue them in the draft and usually overvalue them in trade packages.
I'm here. I like to inform the public on different things, and I think VSiN is the platform. Even when I'm not here, like I always say, where else are you going to get information like this?
That's right.
I mean, people, that's the number one question asked to me. Hey, Crack, can you help me out? Hey, Crack, can you help me? What do you think I should do going forward? Everyone wants to be a professional. It's unbelievable how many people say, man, I want to start doing this full time. You know what I always say to them? I wouldn't recommend it for my enemies. I mean, it's such...
You got to be built a certain way.
It's that tough. But take the first step and have VSiN. Here we are.
So let's go with the fact that the interior defense isn't that great for the Houston Rockets. Carmelo Anthony's going to actually get a lot of flack, and he's minus 15 through his 3 games. They've been atrocious in terms of defense.
That's an alarming number.
Yes, it is.
Is that worse than the league by a wide margin?
Yeah, they're dead last in the league in terms of points allowed in the paint per game. So that's going to be a big reason why, and that's why they're not as good defensively. So you look at no Chris Paul, really bad defensively. I feel like the Utah Jazz are really just a good Donovan Mitchell game away from turning things around.
Mm-hmm.
So as part of the hashtag NBA Pick 'em All Challenge, I used the Utah Jazz, catching 2.5 points. To a numbers game with your host, Gil Alexander, broadcasting live from our VSiN studios in Las Vegas.
Back on the numbers game where sports betting analytics live. It's Gil Alexander. Coming up on the show, as I mentioned, Mike Lombardi. We're looking forward to that. Miami Dolphins. Matt just handed me this. Miami Dolphins tweeting on their account at Miami Dolphins on Twitter. Hashtag vote. Protect your rights and vote no on Amendment 3. This is in the state of Florida. A recent U.S. Supreme Court ruling paved the way for states to legalize sports betting. As it stands today, Florida could legalize sports betting tomorrow. If Amendment 3 passes, it would effectively block any chance for legal sports betting in Florida. Protect your right to legally bet on sports and vote no on 3. Miami Dolphins. Miami Dolphins. Miami Dolphins. We stole our theme song from the Chargers. Basically, is how that went. Why do they do that? How do they get away with that? The Chargers used to do that, and the Dolphins just stole the theme song. But they're for sports betting, so we forgive them.
No copyright, I guess.
Yeah. Good for the Dolphins. We can all get behind that. That's where we all come together. Across the aisle. Extend an olive branch on sports betting. I love it. We'll have election bets later on the show. Let's bring in, let's talk some NBA. Because the NBA is just filled with drama. Drama queens, maybe, too. Let's bring in Dan Besbris from the Fantasy NBA Today podcast. Good morning to you, Dano.
Good morning, Gil. How you doing?
Man, you sound great on Skype. You're right here.
Hey, maybe I am.
Maybe you are. Dan Besbris, the only man who had a podcast before I did. Dan started his podcast in the late 70s, I believe it was. At Dan Besbris on Twitter, Besbris. I don't know where to start, Dan. There's so many places to go here. Let's start with Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler, who apparently only plays in the state of California now when the T-Wolves go to California. I think those are the rules of the game right now. Seems to be holding the T-Wolves hostage. He graced them with his presence in a 120-109 loss at the Clippers last night. T-Wolves failed to cover the 5-point number. They lose by 11. Jimmy Butler didn't play against the Blazers. He played against the Warriors before that, didn't play against the Jazz from a commit, and then played against the Lakers before that. So, again, it's just the marquee California sort of flashy venues that he's playing, or against the California teams. But the games that you would think from a competitive standpoint, the T-Wolves would absolutely want him playing in. Well, they want him playing every game. But if you had a choice, if it wasn't really about resting, as they're saying, they'd want him to play against the Blazers and against the Jazz and teams like that, not against the Warriors, for instance, right? That's the game where they'd sort of punt on if they had a choice. So obviously something's going on here. What's going on with Jimmy Butler, and how does this end?
Poorly, I think, is the short answer to that. I have no idea how this has gotten to this point. I mean, the only thing you can do is blame Tom Thibodeau over and over again for allowing it to get this far. We had that word a few weeks ago that a trade was basically agreed upon with the Miami Heat, and then the Wolves kind of moved the goalpost. You're absolutely right. He should be playing the intra-divisional games.
Right.
They need him against teams like Utah, against Portland. That's the Northwest Division. And instead, they got him playing against the Warriors, a game they got no chance in. You know, the Lakers one, I guess, makes sense because they probably lose that game to LA if he's not in it. But the Clippers are a better team than people realize. He's showing off because apparently he and Kawhi both want to be Clippers now, and something weird is going on. The world is upside down, Gil.
Jeez.
It's really bad. And there were stretches in yesterday's game against the Clippers where you could see on the floor he was kind of icing out his teammates, and then his teammates were kind of icing him out. Like Butler had a great opportunity in the post against, I think, Lou Williams. So there was like a gnat guarding him near the bucket. And the Wolves just wouldn't throw him the ball. They gave it to Wiggins 26 feet away, and he took a terrible shot, unsurprisingly. The whole thing is awful. Like it has spilled onto the court.
Does this cause you, Dan? I'm sorry. Does this cause you to not bet on, to fade them, or to just stay away entirely?
I'm trying to stay away. There's just too much uncertainty where, like, maybe there's a game where he goes nuts. Maybe it's Jimmy Butler proving something night, or maybe it's the other guys proving something night.
Right.
I've attempted to find that moment where if you can really get an idea, but you just don't know what's going through Cat's head on any given night, or Derrick Rose's head, or Jimmy's head. You sort of find out by about the second quarter, and then maybe you could consider some in-game wagering. Things tend to kind of play themselves out as you'd expect at that point. But before the game, it's too much uncertainty. I don't want to have money sitting on something you really can't predict.
And it's kind of taken away from the feel-good story that is Derrick Rose to a degree. The T-Wolves 2 games out of third place in the Western Conference last year. Now 14th of 15 teams in the Western Conference in terms of point differential, as they sit at 4-7 here in the early going of the NBA season. But you can only say early going for so long. These games count. So they better figure out something, and they better figure out something real quick. You mentioned in there Kawhi. The Toronto Raptors, 10-1, Dano. 10-1, and they played their last 2 games without Kawhi. Games that featured them leading the Lakers 42-17 at the end of the first quarter. And then we'll get to Luke Walton next, by the way, now that I'm thinking about it. And then last night, in what is a Dan Besbris old school betting tenet, they bucket the Raptors on a back-to-back into the mountains, which you and I have talked for the better part of a decade. This was always one of your huge things. And the NBA scheduling has minimized these situations now. But there was one last night, or the Raptors-Jazz game, and the Raptors, without Leonard, crushed them 124-111. Raptors are just this good, huh?
Yeah, that was a kick to the nethers on that one. Nethers. Yeah, I mean, you can't win them all, right? Nothing is 100% in this world. But yeah, the Raptors are well coached. They are deep as heck, and they were deep as heck last year, and they just ran into the LeBron James thing that happens every season. Kawhi obviously does help them in a lot of ways, but what has really helped them as well, and it's funny too, last year I sent like one tweet out about how good the Raptors bench was, and the entire city of Toronto found it somehow. So they really, they're big into their basketball. And it's really cool. It's a team that I've kind of rooted for quietly for a number of years. And it's nice to see them playing well again. But you talk about guys like OG Anunoby, who's made big strides. Pascal Siakam, who suddenly can do stuff on the offensive end of the floor as well as defense. And figure this one out, Gil. Serge Ibaka has moved closer to the rim, and he's making more shots.
This is the guy I wanted to focus on, because I can't tell you how many times last year, and this was during Tankapalooza, which, again, 2 months of unbelievable betting where we lost literally like twice. But whenever we bet on the Raptors, I can't tell you how many times when I recommended a Raptors bet that when I would watch the Raptors just eke into a victory in Tankapalooza, like we had a lot of close calls, it was always Serge Ibaka who I was like, oh my God, like when did Serge Ibaka suck so bad? And now here he is again, playing great basketball.
He's back. It's this insane theory where if you get really, really close to the hoop, it gets easier to put the ball into it.
What?
Wow. All these big guys that have drifted 30 feet away that can't make shots anymore, it's really refreshing, actually, for the Raptors to say, hey, Serge, we have these really good players on this team, and they're going to get you wide open within 6 feet of the rim. I know that there's this whole, everybody says, everything's got to be a three-pointer. But let's not forget the other half of this kind of modern NBA. It's layups and three-pointers. It's okay to get a really easy look at the bucket, stop shooting 22-footers, but shoot a 5-footer. That's okay. So Serge is so much better this year. I wish guys like Blake Griffin would take a cue from him and get closer to the rim again. It's really refreshing. They're using their pieces well in Toronto, and they're beating the heck out of everybody.
Talking to Dan Besbris. Follow him on Twitter at Dan Besbris, Besbris, the host of the Fantasy NBA Today podcast, distributed where all podcasts are available. Dan, you mentioned, or I mentioned the Lakers. So I got to talk about Luke Walton. Magic Johnson famously coming out and saying some things about Luke and then saying, hey, look, we're not firing him. all that I had a tantrum about. We're not going to fire him. But can I make the case here? I know, listen, people love Luke Walton. The Lakers are 4-6 with LeBron James. It's only 10 games. Don't want to go crazy, but they're 4-6. Luke Walton, who won, tons of games with the Warriors. I'm thinking you and I might have been able to win tons of games with the Warriors as well, Dano. So I don't really give them a whole bunch of credit there. But they haven't played defense. Talking about the Lakers now. They haven't played defense in 3 years. Brandon Ingram, has he gotten any better? Lonzo Ball, ditto. Has he gotten any better? Again, they were losing to the Raptors by 25. The Raptors without Kawhi after one quarter the other night. Like, at some point, it is kind of the coach, right? Like, he has to bear some responsibility. And if you replaced him with, I don't know, a Van Gundy, just to throw out a name, like, doesn't this change overnight?
So I don't know if a Van Gundy necessarily changed. I mean, it'd be a louder person on the sidelines.
Yeah.
That would be one of the I think you are getting to one point that does make sense, though, which is the Lakers sort of need someone there that can convince LeBron to play a little defense, because it does kind of start at the top. If you can get your superstar, your best player, to set an example at one end of the floor, the other guys can follow it. I mean, you could even see it in that game against Toronto. When LeBron was on the sidelines, the young guys actually started to play a little bit of defense, and they looked better. Now, you can't put the blame on LeBron for, all 6 losses or all 4 wins or whatever it is. He obviously makes them a much better team. But there does have to be a little bit of a LeBron buy-in. Like, he has to appear as though he's playing defense on the floor, and I think the other guys will follow. In terms of who's gotten better, I watch every single Laker game, and I can say with relative certainty that it's hard to tell so far this year. Because of the number of different lineups they've used, the suspensions obviously playing a role in that. A lot of Rajon Rondo means not a ton of defense either, but he's been better for offensive flow for that team so far. So they're still trying to kind of feel things out a little bit. And on the Luke Walton front, maybe that voice is not the one that can convince LeBron, someone who's basically his peer. Maybe you need somebody with a little bit more clout to get him in line. But I'm inclined to say that LeBron's going to basically do what he's going to do, and then the other guys are going to follow almost regardless of who's telling him what he needs to do, outside of maybe Pat Riley and Magic Johnson. So maybe it's on Magic to get in there and talk to the players a little bit.
Talking to Dan Besbris. Dano, only 4 games on the NBA slate tonight, including the Dwight Bola virus-infected Washington Wizards, who you pointed out.
Very nice.
You pointed out to me off air. Might even be better with Dwight than without him. Like, he might have actually, he might even be better for them than without, which is saying something. But just generally speaking, so even if you don't have a play tonight, and maybe you do, but even if you don't have tonight, there's some situations coming up that you wanted to point out from a betting perspective.
Yeah, situationally, and a few of them happened over the last few days, this is a part of a season where you're not into the true scheduling grind stuff yet, but something for people to look out for, teams that get into these kind of get up and let down situations, where it happened with Indiana was a good example of that. It happened with Milwaukee a couple days ago. It happened with Boston. These teams out east that are sort of trying to vie for who should be at the top, they ended up playing one another almost in a round-robin type fashion. And, Indiana obviously got up for the Boston game and then weren't really up for the Houston Rockets game the following time out. Those games are going to start surfacing a little bit. Also, look for teams coming off of a massive, massive blowout loss. That tends to help move lines against them, and you can create a little bit of artificial value, even if it's only for like a day, by betting on that team the next time out. They tend to respond with big-time aggression. They give a little extra effort. These are the things to keep an eye out for as we get into now kind of the regular flow of the NBA season, and the uncertainty of rotations and teams the first 3 weeks becomes a thing of the past.
All right, Dan Besbris, Fantasy NBA Today podcast. Check it out, as always, where all podcasts are distributed. Dano, we thank you, and let's hope for less drama in this league, for God's sakes.
No, more drama. It's so much fun.
I guess it's something. Let's put it that way. Thank you, Dano. Appreciate it as always. By the way, apologies to the Houston Oilers franchise. I botched that earlier. Obviously, the San Diego Chargers had their own song. San Diego Chargers, Superchargers one. It was the Houston Oilers that the Dolphins lifted their theme from. with no repercussion. Just theft in broad daylight. So sorry, Houston Oilers. I apologize for that. Coming back, Mike Lombardi, Pete Futak, NFL, college football, maybe even some next-gen third down stats. Because the Oilers, and I sort of buried the headline, not the Oilers, the Titans, the Oilers then ended up becoming after their move to Tennessee. The Titans' key stat last night, as we try to point out on a numbers game all the time, was third down conversion rate. They were 11 of 14. Man, that's all you really need to know in any football game. If you know that stat, you probably know the winner. We'll talk about the teams that are making hay both on offense and defense, that as well. It's a numbers game right here at VSiN.
It's a numbers game, live from the tip of the strip in Las Vegas. Get your fill of numbers even after the show is over by following the crew on Twitter, @BeatingTheBook and @VSiN Live.
If you didn't catch VSiN last week, here's some of what you missed.
This is from Playboy. I think they're both. Playboy is when Tyson got knocked out by James Buster Douglas. So Playboy
Buster
got a hold of
Douglas,
Playboy
yeah.
last year, and they had this wonderful picture of Douglas standing over top of Tyson. So they called me up. They did a story around it, and this is one of the things that I will always keep. Now, I also want to make it clear that Playgirl contacted me to be in their next centerfold issue also.
Is that the basketball picture?
It was a yin and a yang. Yeah, that was it.
You certainly are going to settle for just the first-round pick for Derek Carr. I'm thinking that if someone offers them a first and a fourth, the conditional fourth, which could elevate based on certain conditions, kind of like the Sam Bradford trade, maybe they have to seriously consider that. Don't forget, 2016, Derek Carr, third in the MVP voting. People were making these Aaron Rodgers comparisons, which don't seem to have any validity for the way he's played ever since then. But quarterbacks are hard to find, and teams overvalue them in the draft and usually overvalue them in trade packages.
I'm here. I like to inform the public on different things, and I think VSiN is the platform. Even when I'm not here, like I always say, where else are you going to get information like this?
That's right.
I mean, that's the number one question asked to me. Hey, Crack, can you help me out? Hey, Crack, can you help me? What do you think I should do going forward? Everyone wants to be a professional. It's unbelievable how many people say, man, I want to start doing this full time. You know what I always say to them? I wouldn't recommend it for my enemies. I mean, it's such...
You got to be built a certain way.
It's that tough. But take the first step and have VSiN. Here we are.
So let's go with the fact that the interior defense isn't that great for the Houston Rockets. Carmelo Anthony's going to actually get a lot of flack, and he's minus 15 through his 3 games. They've been atrocious in terms of defense.
That's an alarming number.
Yes, it is.
Is that worse than the league by a wide margin?
Yeah, they're dead last in the league in terms of points allowed in the paint per game. So that's going to be a big reason why, and that's why they're not as good defensively. So you look at no Chris Paul, really bad defensively. I feel like the Utah Jazz are really just a good Donovan Mitchell game away from turning things around. Mm-hmm. So as part of the hashtag NBA Pick'em Challenge, I used the Utah Jazz, catching 2.5 points.
Back to a numbers game with your host, Gil Alexander, broadcasting live from our VSiN studios in Las Vegas.
Back on the numbers game here at VSiN, Gil Alexander, Matt Jones, in for Jorge, where sports betting analytics live. We had a positive review yesterday for Bohemian Rhapsody, and people have been sort of 50-50 on our review of it. Some Queen purists, I think very accurately, saying that the chronology of the music was not really portrayed. I mean, absolutely, there were details that were not. If it was a movie on an artist that I loved to that extent, I'd be annoyed by that as well. Left out, I don't know, sex, drugs, and rock and roll to some degree as well.
Yeah. So they covered the rock and roll part.
They did.
They left out a lot of the sex and drugs.
They did. Sort of not a lot of sex and drugs. But if you love the music, it's hard not to like the movie. And as we said yesterday, it's not winning an Oscar, but enjoyable. And I'll stand by what I said. Freddie Mercury, the greatest pure voice of popular music in our lifetime. Just in terms of the voice quality, phenomenal. There's a doubleheader in college basketball tonight. I would be remiss not to mention that. Big ESPN doubleheader. Do we have the lines up here at the South Point Hotel Casino? Might we post those at VSiN.com, the VSiN app, and right here at Fubo TV? What a way to start the college basketball season with this kind of doubleheader. SVP was talking to Coach Calipari yesterday about it, and Coach Calipari is pretty honest about having these kind of matchups right out of the gate in college basketball. Like, would you really want it from the start? And he said, probably, maybe not. Maybe if they had it in a perfect world, they wouldn't start the season with this. But it is happening. Duke and Kentucky, Blue Bloods tonight. Duke and Kentucky, number 4, number 2 preseason rankings. The Wildcats 2-point favorites over the Blue Devils. And let's make no mistake about it. One-and-done Coach Calipari against one-and-done Coach K. Because that's how they roll at Duke these days. Duke and Kentucky being one of the 2 contests tonight. That is it preceded or followed by the other game? Did we put the second game up first by any chance right there? I think we might have. Duke and Kentucky is the marquee matchup of the 2, I would imagine. Just a great doubleheader tonight in college basketball. Again, election coverage. That game preceded, while you're voting and looking at election coverage, maybe taking some college basketball. That game preceded, if you will, chronologically, 7 p.m. tip-off Eastern Time, 4 p.m. Pacific, between the Spartans of Michigan State and the Jayhawks. Number 1 Kansas, 5.5-point favorites against Michigan State. That's the line here at the South Point Hotel Casino. ESPN doubleheader. Check it out again. Election coverage, if you need a respite from that. Couple great games in college basketball. Mike Lombardi, NFL rants coming up on a numbers game at VSiN.